This is the Chappell Real Estate Show, episode number 3.
Welcome to the Chappell Real Estate Show, your source for the latest real estate information so you can buy, sell, and invest with the best in Texas. Whether you're a first-time buyer, a current homeowner, or a seasoned investor, you've come to the right place. We're here to simplify all things real estate so you can achieve your goals of property ownership with your hosts, Daniel and Roger Chappell.
Good morning, listeners. Welcome to episode 3 of the Chappell Real Estate Show, where we discuss all things real estate so that you can buy, sell, and invest with the best. I'm your host, Daniel Chappell, and I'm here with my co-host, top-performing real estate agent, Roger Chappell. How are you doing this morning, Dad?
Good morning, everybody. Hey, Daniel, how are you?
Good. Another day in paradise. So if you tuned into one of our first 2 episodes, you might have heard some of the stuff that we've been talking about. But today's topic, we're really excited to bring to you guys, and it's a topic that a lot of people need to hear about right now, and it's the topic of sellers in the market. So as you might have caught in one of our previous episodes, inventory is incredibly low right now. So this is a perfect market for sellers to position themselves if they price their homes correctly to get a really lot of activity on their property. So there are tons of buyers in the market in the Austin area. Mind you, we're in the Central Texas area, so there's a ton of buyers that are out here. There's not a lot of inventory available. So when properties are hitting the market at the right price, they are flying off the shelves like hotcakes. So, we want to talk to all the homeowners out there who are considering selling their home, but maybe just aren't sure where to start or how to position their homes to sell quickly in today's market. So why should you listen to us? Well, as we've mentioned before in our previous episodes, we're real estate agents in the Austin and Central Texas area, licensed but combined between the two of us for about 7.5 years. We are affiliated with Coldwell Banker, the Chappell Realty Group team of Coldwell Banker. And, we are super excited to be able to share a lot of information with you guys. So, Dad, why don't we go ahead and start diving into the episode? How many homes would you say more or less that you personally have bought and sold that kind of make you credible to speak on today's topic?
Well, personally, Mom and I have bought and sold, I don't know, eight or 9 homes, more than that probably. If I sat down and actually counted it, some of them we've renovated and rented out. Some of them we lived in and renovated and eventually leased out. Some of them we've bought, renovated, and sold. So just a combination of things herein. Quite a few of them over the years. Plus in my real estate career, somewhere around 120, 125 homes in the last couple of years, or last few years. So yeah, quite a bit of experience buying and selling.
Yeah, I would say so. So as we mentioned before, inventory is very low in the Austin and surrounding areas. And I'm sure that stands true for a lot of markets around the country right now. So if you're tuning in from somewhere else, we're talking about Central Texas specifically, but a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in Central Texas is happening in some of the other markets around the country. So, what makes it such a strong seller's market and what makes it such a great time to sell your home right now?
So right now it's inventory. Inventory is driving everything. So going back to when COVID first hit us, in real estate, everything just across the country literally hit a pause. So for a couple of months, people who had their homes on the market took their homes off the market, and understandably so. They didn't want people walking through their home that might have been exposed to COVID-19. So a lot of people took their homes off the market, and to this day, many have not put their homes back on the market. So we have a very, very low inventory just because of that alone. In addition, we still have people coming to Central Texas. They have to have a place to live. So one of the other things we noticed is our new home sales skyrocketed, and now they're out of inventory in a number of different builders. So now, and then you go into material. So once they sold out, they bought all the material that there was, and because the economy was shut down for a period of months, that created a gap that still hasn't been filled yet. So a lot of that material and appliances and things of that nature never made it to our market. So there's been that lag they've been working very hard to try to catch up to. But the bottom line is we have a very, very low inventory, and that makes it, a very strong seller's market in any market. When you have low inventory, you have a very strong seller's market.
Makes perfect sense. So I kind of want to touch on something that you just mentioned and kind of highlight it for people who may not have caught on to the nuance of it. But you mentioned it. Inventory on even new construction is very low right now. So that actually puts sellers that are in a resale position in the unique position of being able to market a home that is available for move-in now. Right. Because, there used to be the advantage of you could go into a new builder and they'd have some inventory on the ground. You could buy a house and maybe be in it by the end of the month or by the end of 1 or 2 months down the line. Whereas now these build time frames in new construction are taking 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 months. And it might be a while. If you're in a position where you're renting for that time period, that's money lost. So if you're a seller that has a home that is in good condition and you put it on the market today, you have the advantage of being able to sell a product that can be moved into almost immediately. So that's a big advantage right now too. Well, that's a perfect lead into today's Chappell Chunk. So today's Chappell Chunk, in a market like today, where, as Roger already alluded to, buyers are mostly starting their searches online. COVID-19 has changed the way that buyers are behaving. Open houses aren't as prominent. People are a little bit more hesitant to go look at a home that maybe didn't show as well online, just because people aren't as comfortable being out in public right now. So your Chappell Chunk for the day is going to be not to skimp out on digital marketing in an age where everyone is starting their searches online. So, when you work with the Chappell Realty Group team of Coldwell Banker, there are a ton of advantages that we offer to our clients whenever we list their properties in the realm of digital marketing, targeted ads, private websites, professional photography. We syndicate on up to 700 different real estate websites. So wherever people are looking at homes, your home is going to be featured. So there are a lot of things that we do on the terms of digital marketing, in addition to just traditional marketing, sending out stuff to the neighborhood and the neighbors, because a lot of people want to have their friends and family move into their neighborhood. So who better to let know that your house is for sale than the people that live on your block? So all of that stuff is extremely important. So don't skimp on a digital marketing in the day and age where everybody is starting their search online. That is going to be your tip of the day. So that being said, let's go ahead and dive into today's episode.
Wishing you a safe and prosperous 2021 from our team at Chappell Realty Group.
Alrighty, so for us to move into today's topic, I'm going to go ahead and have my dad present us with a little bit of a scenario. So go ahead and take the reins, Dad.
So a common conversation occurs between husband and wife, or a couple who are living in a home. And especially since COVID-19, this conversation is happening a lot more frequently. So people are now working from home, and because they're working from home, they need more space. So they've had to convert bedrooms into offices, or maybe they're using the dining room table, or maybe they're using the kitchen counter, or who knows where their office is actually located, where they've got their dogs in the background, the kids interrupting on Zoom video calls and things of that nature. So suddenly they find themselves with a need that they didn't have just a year ago. Or maybe the kids have grown and they're moving away, or they've gone off to college, or they've taken jobs elsewhere, and now they're moving away. So now you have a couple such as my wife and I, your mom and I, who are what we call empty nesters now. So folks are looking to downsize. So that conversation is typically, literally, they're sitting around over dinner or whatever, and they get to talking, I'd really like to have a different house for whatever reason. The reasons can vary from, we've got a younger couple who now have kids that are going into school. They want to get into a better school district. You've got another couple or another individual who has a house that's, I'd really like to have some more land. Or you've got somebody who wants to start a farm. Been wanting to ranch their whole life. So now they want to buy a farm and ranch. At any rate, these conversations happen all of the time. And now they decided, it's probably time for us to sell a house. Many of these folks have been living in that house, especially if they're downsizing. They may have been living in that house for 20 plus years. They haven't bought or sold a house in a long time. And guess what? It has changed since the last time they bought or sold their house. When I say it, I'm talking about not just the market, but the process for buying and selling a home. Like you alluded to earlier and mentioned specifically, is digital marketing. People are now searching online for their home. are searching online for their homes. So they know exactly what they're looking for. So they think. So that's where, we as real estate agents come in because we're able to talk with them and narrow it down where we can help them find what it is that they're looking for. But more importantly, like in today's episode, we can talk to them about how we can market their home and get it sold on them as quick as possible for the highest possible price point.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So, when those conversations start to happen in the house, the next question that usually comes up is, well, where do we go from here, right? Okay, we've talked about it. We've got a great house. We've got a great product, and we think that it might be time for us to make a move and right size. So, when it comes to that, the next question is usually going to be, what's the next step? So, what would you recommend as the next step? They've had that conversation. Now, where do we go from here?
So typically, most people, when they start this discussion, they don't know whether they should get a real estate agent or if they should talk to their neighbors, start looking on Zillow or Realtor or some of the other websites to get an idea for what their home is worth. And that's something else too. They're gonna do that research, and they have an idea of what they think their home is worth. So in my mind, you need to get with a real estate professional in your area, and the reason being is only that agent, a good agent, a professional agent, will be able to tell you what your home is really worth in today's market. Now, mind you, that agent is not an appraiser. They can't tell you what your home is valued at, but what they can tell you is that the market data and the market research suggests that a home is worth X amount of dollars. And here's something to keep in mind. And this happens with every single one of us. I don't know how many conversations I've had with my own neighbors who have mentioned someone who sold their house for X amount of dollars, only for me to research and find out that is not true. That's not what that house sold for. I know it because I have access to that data. So to hear some of these conversations take place is actually quite funny and enlightening because, people talk to their neighbors and guess what? Neighbors lie.
They sure do. They sure do. That's too funny because it really does happen, especially when you're in the business, and any real estate agent will probably tell you this, that they've had that happen at a listing appointment where, well, such and such down the street said they sold their house for 350. Well, I've got the data right here that says they sold it for 325. So Joe Blow down the street is not being completely honest with you. So that's too
Correct.
funny. So now you found your local real estate agent. So what are some of the things that a seller should be prepared to do when they're talking about getting ready to list their home?
So again, another great question. So there's a number of factors that we look at. So first of all, after you're speaking with your real estate professional, he or she is going to take a look around the home. They're going to take a look at some of the main features that one has. I know for you and I, when we go on our listing presentations, one of the things I want to know is what attracted these people to buy the house in the first place? What were their favorite features? And since they're living there, I also want to know what are their least favorite features? What are the things that you don't like about the house? To me, those things are very important as well. So I kind of keep that in mind as well. But then we also have to come up with a marketing strategy. One of the biggest things, and I'm just going to cut right to the chase, what I call the 3 C's. The 3 C's are curb appeal, clutter, and cleanliness. So when a couple pulls up in front of a house, they want to know immediate, what is their first impression? They're going to look at the front of that house. So how does it look? That's the curb appeal side of it. Is the yard well maintained? Is the grass green, or is it dry and dead in a lot of places? A lot of folks can tell right away if you have a sprinkler system. So if they're taking a look at it, they'll know. Are the trees nice and trimmed? How does the front of the house look? What about the rest of the neighborhood? If you look down the street, do people have old abandoned vehicles parked in the yard? Or they're like RVs and big trailers and things like that parked where they can be visible from the street? All of these kind of things send a message to buyers. So those things are good and bad. It doesn't matter whether it's a good or bad thing, but those are the kinds of things that attract buyers or turn buyers away. So with those kinds of things in mind, you want to make sure that your house is one of the better ones on the block or in that neighborhood. Number 2, the clutter. So when I walk into a house and I start looking around, one of the things that I mention to the sellers almost every time is when you're looking around the house, there's some things that you want to do. You want to declutter. What does that mean? That means simply take down all your personal items, if they're personal photos, if there are words, if there are things that identify you as the seller or you as an individual, you want to make sure that you remove those things, pack them up, and put them in a garage. You can buy these little tubs at Walmart or wherever, put them in these little tubs, and then stack the tubs in a garage. When buyers start coming in to take a look at the house, they know you're moving. So things stacked up in a garage is not only perfectly normal, it's expected. So you can do all of that and start decluttering. Decluttering also means smaller items. Perfect example is in the kitchen. And I think I mentioned this in the first episode. When one walks into a kitchen, they don't want to see a bunch of stuff on the counters. So if you've got pots and pans and spices and all these different things that you use on a regular basis, all of that needs to come down so that the kitchen countertops are pretty bare, so that the prospective buyer can take a look at it and imagine their own stuff in the kitchen. So that's the clutter part of it. Bathrooms are a perfect example. I can't tell you how many times this happens where we go in to take photos of the bathroom and then we see shampoo bottles and we see creams and we see all these different items that are up around the sink and in the shower and those kinds of things. You really do want to pack those things away and put them away. Closets are a really big deal. A closet, if it's jam-packed full, when someone opens a closet door and takes a look, they're not going to see space. What they're going to see is, my gosh, this place is tiny. So if you remove about half of that stuff, and think about it, if it's summertime, do you need your winter clothes in there? No, pack up all the winter clothes, get them packed away, label them in a box, put them in a garage. That immediately will eliminate almost half of what's in your closet. So once you eliminate that, now you've created space. If you've got games and blankets and things that might be stored in the closet, go ahead and pack those things up. Make that closet look like it's bigger by reducing the amount of items that are in that closet. Those are just some of the things that I would suggest to get it ready. Finally, cleanliness. Everybody loves a clean home. So if you've been living in a house for 5 or 10 years and you've got carpet that hasn't been shampooed in God knows how long, probably best to go ahead and have those carpets shampooed. Also, if you have pets emit a smell that I'm telling you, you don't recognize when you're the one that lives in that house. But a buyer can walk in when they don't have pets and they smell that right away. Cats, dogs, you name it, they can smell it right away. So the best thing to do is make sure that the carpets are clean. If you do have pets, start keeping those areas, clean. And I mean, you can't really mask that smell. So we have to make sure that we're aware of that. So when you can, try to get the pets into a place that, I mean, if you can remove them from the property for a period of time, that's the best way to go. I mean, I'm a pet owner as well. I'm not taking my dog somewhere else unless I can take them to your house, drop them off with you for a couple, 3 weeks while I'm trying to sell a house.
Yeah.
But short of that, I mean, it is what it is. But if we let people know that in advance, then maybe we can mitigate that later on.
Yeah, absolutely. So to recap, basically we've got the triple C and the double D, right? The depersonalize and declutter, and the triple C's cleanliness, curb appeal, and clutter. So quick little recap there. Well, that's all great information, really great information. So let's go ahead and start transitioning into kind of the next step. So, all right, we've gotten the house ready to sell. Should I have the house inspected as a seller? Is that something that you would recommend just to kind of get a leg up on any of the repair issues that may come up, once it actually gets under contract?
That's a great question. So I typically will leave that decision completely up to the seller. My advice to them is, as a seller, you live in that house, you know what's wrong with it. You know some of the maintenance issues that you could have. So go ahead and take care of those things. You can go ahead and have the house inspected, especially if you really don't understand what the items might be looked for. That's always a good idea. In Texas, inspections cost anywhere between $300 and $500, typically, depending on the size of the home and depending on what needs to be inspected. If you have septic and maybe septic systems are a big thing around here. So septic systems not only need to be inspected, they also need to be pumped. So if I have a seller who has those things, I want them to go ahead and have that done. And then we provide that along with the listing. And the main reason is when you sell a home, you don't want to sell your poop along with the home. Go ahead and have that stuff pumped and cleaned out, because a buyer comes in there, if they find out that hasn't been taken care of, they're going to want you to do it anyway. Go ahead and do it. It costs $350 to have it pumped. In addition, you can go ahead and have that septic system inspected. And if there are problems with it, go ahead and get that taken care of, because I'm telling you, that's going to fall on the seller at some point anyway. Go ahead and take a look at that and get that squared away. What that does too is it also shows a potential buyer that the homeowner has actually gone out of their way to make sure that they're selling a good product. As far as inspecting the home itself, I know me as a seller, I know what condition my home is in. So I'm not necessarily going to have it inspected. I know that an inspection is going to come in. And then when I have that, if the buyer will provide me with the inspection report, I will take a look at it. We'll work out the repairs and things like that later on. That's part of the negotiation process once we receive an offer. One of the other things that I forgot to mention too is that your agent is most likely going to have professional photographs taken. I highly recommend professional photos. Highly, highly, highly recommend professional photos. I looked at just this morning another listing on a $600,000 home, and I'm shocked to see that these were cell phone pictures taken of that home. It just baffles me. I do not understand why real estate agents in today's market will take a shortcut and just take cell phone pictures. That to me is unprofessional. It's also demeaning to the seller themselves. So I just don't. I don't like that at all. Professional photos, when it goes out there to the World Wide Web, everybody's taking a look at those pictures. When the pictures are professional, they look fantastic. That's going to attract buyers to come and see the house. That's what we want. We don't want to push them away by ugly pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, there's an Instagram page dedicated to that, Bad Real Estate Pics. If you want to see how not to list your property, Bad Real Estate Pics on Instagram will show you exactly what not to do. So that's a really good one.
Props to that Instagram page. How about that, huh?
Right? No kidding. No kidding. Well, awesome. So now we've got a live listing, right? We've got the photographs. We've got everything all set to go. It's looking pretty. So now we've got a live listing. What do I expect? What are showings like?
So that's a great question. And it depends on a number of factors as to how that showing is going to take place or how those appointments will take place. So that you will discuss with your real estate professional, and then they will come up with a strategy that best suits the seller. So sometimes it's as quick as, if the house is vacant, we typically tell the buyers just to go. What that means is that the real estate agent doesn't have to set an appointment as long as they go within certain hours. And that all depends on how it's all set up. So that's a discussion to have with your real estate professional. But go simply means bring your buyer. I want them to see the house immediately. The second point would be an appointment. And sometimes the appointments, the seller just needs maybe 30 minutes notice to show. Typically for me, I've got dogs. So give me 30 minutes. Let me put my dogs away. I'll get out of the house, and then the buyer can come in. That's all I need. And I may not even need 30 minutes. Depends on the time of day. So for me as a seller, that's how I would look at it. Another way to do that is I work from home. So I'm going to need maybe 2-3 hours. Sometimes I may need a full day because I may have meetings scheduled throughout the day, and I'm not able to block out certain times for those meetings or Zoom calls or things of that nature. So whatever the seller needs to do is what the real estate professional should set that listing up. Finally, I don't think it's a good idea for the sellers to be in their home. I'm not ever going to tell the seller, you must leave your house. It's their house. They don't have to leave if they don't want to. But it's probably a pretty good idea. And the reason being is when buyers are walking through with their agents, they want to be able to talk about the home freely, and they don't feel as free to talk about that home when the seller is there. And that's both good and negative comments. So, and trust me, every home is going to have negative comments. But remember this, sometimes as a seller, we're going to take that as a personal attack against us as an individual. It's not true. They're looking at the home, and they're coming from their own background and their own tastes and things of that nature. The buyer is, that is. So their opinions are based on their own experiences and what it is that they're looking for. It really has nothing to do with the seller itself. They're not trying to insult anybody. They really don't want to insult you. So kind of keep that in mind, that folks aren't trying to be insulting. They just want to take a look at the house. It's just that simple. But they need the freedom to be able to talk about the house with their agent. And they don't have as much freedom to do that if the seller is present. So I highly recommend that the seller leave during those showings and allow the buyers to take a look. Also, the other thing too, when it comes to that, is if the seller and a buyer actually meet, that could affect both positive and negative about an offer in the future. And I have seen that specifically. So you kind of want to avoid that because our goal is, as the real estate professional, is to try to keep this process as smooth as possible. And the best way to do that is to not let the buyer and the seller actually meet until after they close on a property. I mean, that's why they hire agents to begin with. Let us do all of the negotiating and that sort of thing. And I really don't want to get into why it's important, about the meeting side of it, just that it could impact an offer later on. And we don't want that.
Yeah, you want to keep things impartial. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Um, well, I mean, something that you said kind of made me think about another question. So, you mentioned you don't want the sellers to be necessarily present. You're not going to tell them they need to leave, but you're right. It's better for the buyers to have a little bit of freedom to be able to walk through the house, make their comments, and have discussions with their realtor and things of that nature. So, if you're a seller that has a security system in place, I mean, nowadays there's the Ring doorbell cameras and, these at-home monitoring systems that you can have, Blink cameras and all these other brands that have monitoring systems, both audio and video. So if I have a surveillance system as a seller, what is your advice in terms of that? Because, to an extent, we still want the buyer to be able to have those conversations as they go through the house, right?
Right. So in Texas, it's illegal for me to record a voice recording of another individual or another group of people if I am not a party to that conversation. It's flat illegal. I cannot do it. Whether it's in my own home, whether it's out on the street, no matter where it's at, it's illegal for me to record that conversation. There have been arguments made about it's my own house. I should be able to record what's going on in my own house. So I'll leave that to the legal experts. I just know that technically speaking, in Texas, we're not allowed to do that. So with that said, I typically will see if the sellers are able, and in some cases they are not able, to disable the audio portion of those recordings. So if they're unable to do that, then what we have to do is notify the buyers, the prospective buyers, that a surveillance system is in place. So as the real estate agent, I'm going to post a sign at the front door, making it readily available. I'm also going to list it in the MLS to make sure that the public knows when you go through here, your conversation may be recorded. So as long as I notify everybody of that up front, then I should be in compliance with the law. And video is not a problem. So if you have like the Ring doorbell, sometimes those things have voice activation, things of that nature, where you can actually converse with somebody, that's fine. That's okay. If it's just video, that also is okay, regardless of where the video is at. So typically, I still want to notify everybody that they're on surveillance video. So that's just one aspect of that to try to keep in mind for a seller. You just want to make sure that you advise everybody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we tell this to our sellers all the time when they're filling out their seller's disclosure, right? Disclose, disclose, disclose.
That's right. You can't
doesn't hurt.
disclose.
Right. It doesn't hurt. You can't give too much information, I guess. But when it comes to, defects or things of that nature that can get you in trouble, recording and things like that, disclose. There's no sense in trying to hide things that can get you in trouble later on down the line. So what about things that are fixed to the house? I know, we've had transactions in the past where we've had some pretty crazy scenarios, solar panels, wall mounted fixtures for TVs and things of that nature. So, what happens to that kind of stuff? We didn't actually touch on it when we were talking about getting the house ready to list, but, I know typically we would tell somebody, if you want to take it with you, take it down. But when it comes to those things that maybe are not as easy to take down or that you maybe don't necessarily want to take down, what do you do with that kind of stuff?
So in Texas, and this is important to understand, is that everything that I'm giving now is based on Texas law and Texas practices. So Florida, Tennessee, California, Washington State, New York State, all of them have their own little niches, their own laws, and their own regulations. So I'm not talking about any other area other than Texas. So in Texas, if you have a solar system, solar panels, or you have a water softener, or you have TVs that are mounted on the wall, the fixtures that are attached to the home typically convey. What that means is when you sell the house, all of that stuff goes with the house. It's considered real estate. So what does that mean? Solar panels. This is a very important one because solar panels are becoming a thing now in Texas. In California, they have a completely different law regards to those things. So, but in Texas, typically when the house is sold, those solar panels go with the house. So the seller may have a lien, they may have taken out a loan for these solar panels, and now there's a lien against the house. That needs to be disclosed at the beginning of all of this. So if it's not disclosed, suddenly a seller winds up finding out later on, oh my gosh, you mean I got to pay for this out of the proceeds of my house? Yes. So liens against the property in the state of Texas are paid out of the proceeds of the sale of the house. So if a seller does not disclose to their agent in the beginning that they have liens on solar panels or water softeners or things of that nature, then they're going to be quite surprised when they get to closing and they realize that $40,000 is suddenly going to get paid out of their proceeds to pay off this loan. It's just that simple. The loan does not convey with the house. The property conveys with the house. The loan stays with the individuals who obtained the loan. Two different animals. So there are specifics about that, and literally you need to talk about that with your listing agent at the time that you get under you sign that listing agreement with the agent. Make sure that you disclose all liens against the property. That's extremely important. As far as TV mounts and things of that nature are concerned, in Texas, as long as the TV bracket itself is attached to the wall, the bracket conveys, but not the TV. Now, what I have told my sellers is that if you don't want that TV to convey, go ahead and remove the TV. The bracket itself can convey, but remove the TV so we eliminate any confusion. We can also do what's known as exclusions on the listing agreement. So we can put in there, the curtains do not convey. The TVs do not convey. The water softener system does not convey. I'm taking it with me. I own it, I'm taking it with me. The water softener loop may stay, but I'm taking. So those kinds of things we can put as exclusions on the listing itself. Otherwise, if it's not an exclusion, it conveys.
Awesome. Okay, good to know. That's great. So another question that comes up quite a bit with sellers is, I mean, when you have your house on the market, you have a lot of people moving in and out of your house. So what kind of liability protection does a seller have in the event that somebody walks into the house and they slip and fall and hurt themselves?
Great question. So in Texas, in per our listing agreements, and some brokers may be a little bit different, but we'll talk about Coldwell Banker since that's where we belong right now. The typical listing agreement is going to have language in that listing agreement specifying exactly what happens in those scenarios. So it has happened in the past, or it wouldn't be part of the listing agreement, where a buyer or prospect walks through the house, maybe even a listing agent, slips and falls and hurts themselves. In that case, they're going to turn around and file a lawsuit. Well, who are they going to sue? Well, we have it so that our brokerage is protected, the agents are protected, because all we're doing is trying to sell the house and market it. Whereas the homeowner may not necessarily be protected, but that's why they have homeowners insurance. So these folks can file a claim against their homeowners insurance and let that take its course. So expect something like that to happen. And honestly, I haven't seen it happen in as many homes as I've been through, but it could happen. So that is something potential. As far as damage is concerned, I have had a deal once before where some items were taken during a day that we actually showed a house. So we had to answer up for that. No lawsuit was filed or anything like that, but I did have to mention about who the people were that went through the home, which brings me to yet another important thing to mention to our sellers, is that if you have firearms or jewelry or paintings or expensive items in your home and you go to list your home, you want to either remove those items or find some other safe place to keep them, lock those things up in a safe, because you have so many people going in and out of your house. You don't know for sure if somebody's going to take something. You have no idea. As a buyer's agent, sometimes when we're walking through with our clients, when I say sometimes, I mean sometimes I'm a buyer's agent, sometimes I'm a listing agent. But we walk around with our buyers, and we're not actually trying to prevent them from stealing anything. I mean, we have a relationship developed with our folks, but we do kind of want to shadow them and make sure that things aren't disturbed, especially where little kids are concerned, because kids are going to get into stuff. They're just going to do that. So as a seller, if I've got a playroom and I've got my kids' toys and whatnot, I guarantee you some other child is going to come through that house and play with those toys. Happens all the time. And parents do the best they can to prevent that. And guess what? It still happens. So just kind of keep that in mind. Those are the kind of issues that we may have to deal with in the future. But if you lock up all of your valuables or your firearms, those kinds of things, typically you don't have to worry about those issues, but keep that in mind.
Awesome. So moving into the next step, right? So we've gone through the process. The house has been on the market. We've done the showings, and now we've got an offer. You've got some interest. We're receiving some offers. So what comes next? I mean, now we've got 3 or 4 offers. What do we do with our agent?
So that's a great question. So the agent will receive offers in today's market. I don't care what price point you're at. There's multiple offers coming in. As long as the house is priced correctly, there will be multiple offers. So there's 3 different answers that one can give to those offers. They can accept the offer, they can counter the offer, or they can reject the offer. And by the way, when one counters an offer, that means they've rejected the initial offer, but then they counter with something else. So those are the 3 ways that'll happen. So let's assume that we accept the offer. That means all the terms are very favorable towards the seller. The seller has agreed to it. The buyer has agreed to it. Everybody comes to consensus, and bingo, we've got an executed contract. The contract is considered executed once all parties have agreed to the terms of the contract and signed that contract. That contract then goes to the title company. We'll get to that in just a moment. I want to back up a second. Let's assume now that the terms are not favorable to the seller at all. It's a lowball offer. Everything is pushed towards the seller as far as expenses are concerned. The buyer just wants to try to take advantage and see if they can't get a better deal on the house for whatever reason. Those offers, typically your agent will take a look at it, present it to the seller. And mind you, keep this in mind. When an agent receives an offer, we are obligated to present that offer to our sellers. So I'm going to present every single offer I get. I don't care what that offer looks like. I'm going to present it. So I present the offer, they take a look at it, and immediately they said, no, I'm offended by this offer. We're just flat going to reject it. So then I will contact the buyer's agent and let them know that the sellers are welcome to resubmit an offer in the future, that this offer has been rejected, or however I word that discussion. So finally, we have the offer that is most common, and that is a counter. So the offer comes in, your agent will sit down with you and go over all the terms of the contract, things such as, does the buyer want a home warranty? How many days till closing? What about the third-party finance? Who is the lender? The agent hopefully will be able to verify that the pre-approval letter that they received from the lender is legitimate and is good. So they should call that lender to get an idea for whether or not the buyer is actually qualified. We want to make sure that somebody isn't just submitting a piece of paper. We want to verify that that piece of paper is actually accurate and correct. Then we also want to look at how soon can these folks close? What kind of a loan are they getting? Is it a conventional? Is it VA? Is it FHA? Is it USDA? What kind of a loan is it? Is it a cash offer? And if it's a cash offer, do they have the funds to support their cash offer? So all of these kinds of things the agent needs to verify before the meeting with the sellers to go over the terms of the offer. Once the terms are agreed to, we will counter back with the buyer's agent, or not agreed to, but once the terms are discussed with the sellers, we counter back, and then it's a back and forth negotiation until finally all terms are agreed to, and we come to an executed contract.
Awesome. So, that's a great explanation of how that kind of process goes. So now we have accepted an offer, or we've countered an offer, and that counter offer has been accepted. Now we're under contract. So, the next step is going to be, typically that buyer is going to schedule some inspections. So as the seller, I guess not just the inspection, but what other things can you expect, I guess, in that first, we'll say the option period, the first, third that the property's under contract. What can we expect to happen? What is the buyer going to be doing? Sending people to the house to inspect the property, things like that.
So typically when we receive an offer, the closing date will be scheduled for 30 to 45 days out. So within that time frame, there are other time frames that we have to be concerned about. So as a seller, you really do need to have your survey. If you don't have your survey, you can expect that you're probably going to have to pay to get a survey. So make sure that's done. If you don't have it, get it. Number 2, the option period. The option period in Texas is the period where the buyer is allowed to do their due diligence. What that means is they may have a home inspection, they may inspect for septic, they may have the roof looked at, they may have the foundation inspected, or any number of other things. An electrician may have to come out and take a look. So it depends on the condition of the home and what is found during that home inspection. So typically those time frames are about 5 to 7 days long. In today's market, 5-day option period is pretty common. So what that means is during that time, the buyer will have the home inspected. They have to have all of their inspections completed during that time, which includes any estimates on repairs, that sort of thing. Then they also have to try to negotiate that out with the seller. So what that means is if there's any repairs that need to be done or replacement of the roof, things of that nature, all of that needs to be negotiated out within that 5-day period. After that, the next step or next hurdle might be the appraisal. So if a home is priced correctly, appraisal is not a big deal. However, if it is not priced appropriately, or if the offer is far exceeding what the professionals believe that the home will appraise for, then that could be an issue. It just depends. But the appraisal is the next issue. Now, during an inspection, I know that the seller can be present during those inspections, but also the buyer may show up. So my suggestion is to the seller, if you want to be there for the entire inspection, you're welcome to do so. It is your house. I always recommend, though, that they leave the house. Allow the inspection to take place so the inspector can do what he or she needs to do without any interruption from the seller or the buyer, and then they can wrap things up very quickly. I do not want the seller to get involved with the inspector on the possibility that he or she may affect what the inspection finds. I want the inspector to be able to go in and without interference from anybody, be able to inspect that home, period. So buyers may show up most of the time, at least with us. I don't want the buyers there during the inspection itself. I always recommend the buyer show up for the last 30 minutes. I typically will ask the inspector to call the buyer 30 minutes before they're completed so that we can all meet together. At that point, yes, I do want to be there because if there are major issues that come up, I want to be able to see it firsthand and hear it from the inspector so that when I contact the buyer's agent or the seller later on, I can actually talk with them about what it was that I observed. Mm-hmm. So, excuse me, as a listing agent, I don't normally want to be there for that. I just don't. But I prefer as a buyer's agent to be present for that part of the inspection.
Great. So something else that I kind of wanted to touch on, because you mentioned the inspections and everything else. You also mentioned the appraisal. So for the seller, what are some of the things that the seller can do in preparation for that appraisal to kind of give the appraiser a good idea of what's been done on the property since they purchased the home?
So typically what I will suggest to the seller is get together a list of all of the improvements that they have made during the time they've owned the home. And by doing that, you also put a dollar amount as to what one's spent on it. But I'll be honest with you, if you put a pool in the backyard and it costs you $100,000, you're not going to get $100,000 on an appraisal for that pool. It's just, it's just not going to happen. So realistically, you might get 20 to 30,000 in value on that pool. So, and there's a calculation that the appraisers use. And mind you, appraisers are licensed in Texas through the same agency that we're licensed through. So they have training that they have to go through and all this. So they're going to know specifically, or should know specifically, what that pool is going to be worth. And it is never what the homeowner thinks it's worth. So keep that in mind. Same with solar panels. We're starting to see now that appraisers are giving very little, if any, value towards solar panels. So that may change in the future, but right now, very little, if any, value is given to the solar panels. So those are the kinds of things to keep in mind as a seller. So did I answer that question?
Yeah. I think, just making that list and making sure that the appraiser is aware of all the upgrades that you've done since you've been in the house, just to give them a little bit of a frame of reference, right? Hey, this does have a little bit nicer finishes than what it had when it was originally purchased 5-10 years ago, what have you. Well, I mean, that's great. So now we've gotten through that portion of the contract. Now we've gotten through the option period, and it's pretty much smooth sailing from then to closing, as long as timeframes are stuck to when it comes to third-party financing and all that on the buyer side. But let's discuss a little bit, what can the seller expect to pay in closing costs once they actually make it to the table after they've made it through the contract?
That's another great question. So typically when it comes to closing costs, I would give an estimate based on the sales price of the house. So as the seller, typically it's around 2%. It could be less of what the price of the home is. So on a $100,000 home, 2% means $2,000. Now, that number could change. So what does that mean? Or what are those closing costs for the seller? Typically, it's going to be that portion. So if I sell the house on January 31st and I'm the seller, then I'm responsible for the property taxes on that house from January 1 to January 31st. I'm also responsible for my portion of the HOA fees. I'm also responsible for my portion of the homeowner's insurance up to that date. Okay. Anything after that belongs on the buyer side. There may be some other fees associated with title. So a lot of times, and this is always negotiated out in a contract, I may, as the seller, be buying the title insurance for the buyer. Now, in Texas, title insurance is regulated by the state. So it costs a certain amount, and that's that. It's a percentage of whatever the price of the home is, and that's standard across the state of Texas. So there's no fluctuation in how much that costs. So whatever that number comes out to be, then sometimes the seller is responsible for the title insurance as well. So those are the things that are all included in the seller's closing costs. In addition to that, there's going to be the fees associated with selling the house. So typically when I have a listing appointment, I will let the seller know that it's going to cost them anywhere between 6 and 8% on realtor's fees to sell the house, plus the 2% to the approximate 2% in their actual closing costs. All of that comes out at the closing table. Mm-hmm. So those are the fees that are associated with closing for the seller.
Okay, good to know. Well, I mean, I think that pretty much covers, I mean, we've gone through just about the entire transaction from, what it takes to get your house ready to put it on the market, some of the things that you can do to make sure that it's positioned to sell quickly in today's market. What does it look like once you've started doing showings, receiving offers, and going live with the listing, getting under contract, and going through the closing table? So, we hope that we've answered all of your questions today. If there's anything that we might have missed, we'd love to hear your feedback. Let us know. Leave us reviews on the podcast channels. Leave us comments. Reach us on our social media pages. Let us know. We want to curate these videos and these podcasts just for you guys. So let us know what you want to hear about. We'd love to hear from you. Until then, thank you guys again for tuning into the Chappell Real Estate Show, and we'll see you guys next week.
See you next week.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Chappell Real Estate Show. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and leave us a review. Find us on social media at Chappell Realty Group and online at chappellrealtygroup.com. Until next time.